I was a woman dying from a terminal illness. But to the man I loved, I was nothing. Even when I was alone in a hospital bed, begging for help, he was too busy fooling around with someone else. After treating the injured leg and doing a basic checkup, the vet confirmed the kitten was otherwise healthy. It would need to stay at the clinic for a few days. Back home, Julia Lopez completely forgot her promise to cook a huge meal. She was too busy buying cat food and litter online. Tony Kamel started prepping vegetables, hoping that once everything was ready, Julia Lopez would step in as the chef. Have you thought of a name for the kitten? I've got lots of ideas, but none I like. Can you help? Coco. Huh? And just like that, Coco officially became part of their little family. After bringing it home, Julia Lopez, worried about its injured leg, hand-fed it to keep it from moving too much. Coco played along, eating while lying down and whining adorably. It knew Julia Lopez would indulge it, even throwing smug glances at Tony Kamel, who got zero attention. Julia Lopez assumed Tony Kamel didn't like cats. Tony Kamel admitted, "I'm jealous." He really was. Julia Lopez was so affectionate toward the kitten. When was the last time she looked at him like that? Tony Kamel teased Julia Lopez for spoiling the cat. Julia Lopez denied it. He's just recovering, he's weak. So while Julia Lopez napped, Tony Kamel sneakily filmed a video of the fragile Coco climbing out of his bed to eat canned food, then leaping onto the coffee table on 3 legs and letting out a satisfied burp. Told you. This guy's just milking it. Tony Kamel grinned smugly, looking down at the kitten. Coco, I sneer at your nonsense. Julia Lopez doubled over laughing. Tony Kamel had that deadpan humor, always saying the funniest things with a straight face. Coco healed quickly. In no time, he was tearing around the house like a maniac. What gave Tony Kamel a headache wasn't the mess, it was that the clever little creature figured out he was avoiding it and began launching surprise attacks, jumping on his leg from random corners. Eventually, Tony Kamel got hit literally with itchy red spots from the contact. Julia Lopez felt bad, but couldn't bring herself to send Coco away. Her guilt showed on her face. Even if Julia Lopez wanted to send the cat away, Tony Kamel wouldn't let her. He had realized the cat made her happy, her face even flushed with color when she smiled. The worst thing for a patient is having no attachment. Coco had become that emotional anchor for Julia Lopez. Though Tony Kamel wouldn't admit it, he still felt a little jealous of a cat. He applied his ointment, realizing that avoiding the issue only made it worse. Facing it head-on actually helped. Eventually, his allergy disappeared through this strange version of exposure therapy, and Tony Kamel joined Julia Lopez in becoming a proud cat person. I loved the way Coco smells after lying in the sun, Tony Kamel said seriously. But there hadn't been much sun lately, so Coco smelled only of his floral-scented shampoo. This scent is kind of girly, Coco. A little disdain crept into Tony Kamel's tone. Coco, even more disdainful, silently protested it, only wanted to be adored by its pretty lady, not this grumpy man. The couple sometimes took Coco to the beach. To the kitten, the sandy shore was one gigantic litter box, and he rolled around in it like he owned the place. Jason Smith stared at the photos sent by the private investigator, each one cutting into his heart. He watched them over and over, torturing himself, imagining he was the man in that happy little family. Julia Lopez's smile was so bright, so relaxed, making him look even more selfish in comparison. He had even tried to take away her joy of raising a pet. Julia Lopez unpacked parcels lately. She'd been buying a lot of hats and wigs online. The bone marrow transplant hadn't worked. Julia Lopez still needed chemotherapy. Her hair fell out in handfuls. Tony Kamel carefully collected it and stored it in a charm pouch. It started small but grew bigger and bigger over time. Julia Lopez joked that she could probably make a whole wig out of it. Today was another chemo day. Julia Lopez tried on a vibrantly colorful anime-style wig and seemed pretty excited. Chemotherapy was painful and exhausting. She needed to find a little fun for herself. Julia Lopez handed Tony Kamel her bank card, savings from before she started working. Tony Kamel took it, but never used a single cent. The chemo treatments were paid entirely by him. At that moment, Tony Kamel was leaning against the doorframe, smiling as he watched Julia Lopez with her icy blue wavy wig. Her face had shrunk to palm size, making her eyes look even bigger. She really did resemble a manga girl. After trying several, Julia Lopez finally decided to go low-key, putting on a lemon yellow knit beanie. Her mood was as bright as the color. As the chemo drug entered her veins, Julia Lopez broke out in cold sweat. Her lips went pale and cracked. She buried her face in her arms, trembling all over. Pain meant she was still alive, if she could live even one more day for Tony Kamel, who wanted her alive more than anything, and for her parents. Your daughter is not a coward in the face of illness. Julia Lopez believed that eventually her parents would forgive her. They would be heartbroken for her. After the treatment, Tony Kamel wiped Julia Lopez's face gently, his eyes red. She was drenched in sweat like someone pulled out of water, her body thin as paper. That night at the barbecue stall, where she'd eaten so heartily, felt like a hallucination. These days, Julia Lopez only wanted porridge. Tony Kamel kept trying new herbal recipes. What do you feel like tonight? I just got a few royal recipes from an old traditional doctor passed down in his family. Apparently his ancestor was the imperial physician, and best buds with the palace chef. Julia Lopez knew Tony Kamel was being so chatty just to distract her. Lying on his broad back, Julia Lopez listened as he went on about the stingy old man, and couldn't help but laugh. It's still early. I want to walk by the ocean. Back when she was waiting endlessly for Jason Smith every day, Julia Lopez had been unhappy. Now, even though her body was in pain and constantly weak, being with Tony Kamel made the crashing waves sound beautiful. Julia Lopez knew she looked awful, now pale, thin, dull-skinned, and nearly bald. Just yesterday, Tony Kamel was about to shave his head, but Julia Lopez stopped him with, "You won't look handsome anymore." A man as outstanding as Tony Kamel had fallen in love with her when she was at her worst, her ugliest. What had she done to deserve him? She couldn't help but wrap her arms around his neck, wanting to soak up a little more warmth. Tony Kamel, when did you start liking me? Falling for a terminally ill woman, was there anything more foolish or irrational? Tony Kamel had asked himself the same, but never found an answer. How had this woman quietly worked her way into his heart? He'd seen so many patients, including beautiful young women. So why was it Julia Lopez who carved out a space in his soul so deeply? She had become his sweetest, most inescapable doom. What he regretted most was meeting her this way. If Julia Lopez had been healthy, Tony Kamel would rather have never met her at all. He smiled and shook his head. I don't know. I can't find the answer. But Chian, I'm grateful you let me know what love feels like. Love bitter and sweet. But honestly, I wish I'd never tasted it. I want to be the rational, controlled man I used to be. I wish we hadn't met as doctor and patient, that you'd never gotten sick, that we just passed each other on the street. Julia Lopez smiled bitterly. If only. Still, meeting Tony Kamel during this final chapter was the greatest gift life had given her. She remembered a song she'd heard before. The first lines went, I'm not afraid to suffer for you. I'll take on the hardest work without complaint. I'm just scared if I stay up too late I'll miss our date tomorrow. I'm not afraid of sweat, I'll build a castle just for us. I'm just scared that when I catch a cold, I won't be able to taste your cooking. That would be such a waste. That pretty much summed up the first half of her life with Jason Smith. The second half? That was all about her bond with Tony Kamel. Julia Lopez softly hummed, I don't need you to take meds with me. I don't want to be your burden. If I really love you, how could I let you kiss a sick person like me and watch me suffer? I want to be healthy because I promised I'd give you a perfect life. Grand declarations mean nothing taking. Care of myself means I won't drag you down. I want to be healthy because I don't want to see you cry over me. If you look worse than I do, what's the point of love? I once wasted my youth, even acted like I was ready to debut because I fell in love with you. I started wishing for a long life. Please let me be healthy, so even on that darkest day, you can watch me fall asleep, wrapped in the blanket you gave me, moved to tears. This was Julia Lopez's official goodbye to her past. She had finally accepted that she'd fallen for someone else. Someone who gave her love when she least expected it. Julia Lopez suddenly began singing quietly beside Tony Kamel. He listened intently, each word etching itself into his heart. To have one's love returned, what an exhilarating joy. He ran forward a few steps with her on his back, shouting toward the ocean horizon. Julia Lopez, you said it yourself. You're going to live to 100 and stay with me forever. When Jason Smith saw the photos sent by his investigator, a quick check revealed Julia Lopez was still undergoing chemotherapy, which meant the bone marrow transplant had failed. How could that be? Pulling up Julia Lopez's medical records at that hospital, he finally realized the transplant had been little more than a comfort measure. Things were still spiraling toward the worst possible outcome. Jason Smith could no longer sit still. He had thought marrying Latina Mara would somehow save Julia Lopez. He'd been tormented every day, not daring to disturb her. But if it didn't work, why was he just standing here watching her be affectionate with another man? Jason Smith was desperate to return to Julia Lopez's side and never leave again. He still believed Julia Lopez loved him, that she was only close to Tony Campbell because he was her doctor. Jason Smith was confident in Julia Lopez's feelings for him. 9 years long enough to leave a mark on the soul. No man who'd only been around for a few months could compete with that. His phone rang. He frowned when he saw the caller Latina Mara's mother. That woman acted like she was his official mother-in-law and loved throwing her weight around. As soon as he picked up, her jubilant voice came through. Son-in-law, Latina's pregnant, it's a boy. You're going to be a father. She'd even sent the blood sample to Hong Kong to confirm the gender before delivering the good news. Her daughter was really something. Surely Jason Smith would be thrilled to have a son. Wouldn't he reward Latina handsomely? The more she thought about it, the more pleased she became until she realized he'd hung up, and now the call wouldn't go through. Jason Smith felt nothing about the news of being cuckolded. In fact, he felt relieved. This would only speed up the divorce. I won't divorce. I worked so hard, Latina Mara screamed. She had finally become Mrs. Jason. And now, Jason Smith was going back on his word. Aren't you scared Julia Lopez might relapse and need my bone marrow again?